Hi, everyone. I am going to be getting Janet here in just a second, so give me just a moment. It's kind of hard to do this multitasking, but I'm going to do my best. Coming. There she is. I hear you. Do you
Hi,
hear
how are
me?
you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. I always feel like I set this up and then it's a little off kilter with our alignment, so I want to make sure
That's
you
that's
guys.
kind of how I felt too.
Yeah. It always takes a minute to
Always.
get adjusted, right?
I know. I know. Well, I thank you for joining us. I thank you for our audience for joining us. It is the Monday after the Thanksgiving holiday, so it seems like a little bit of an abrupt start back, at least for me. But here we are, and I do feel refreshed and excited to get back into things. So hopefully, this will be a great conversation. And as always, I love learning from you. And I think that our viewers will also get a lot of value from our conversation. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Hopefully, you survived your day back at school today.
I know it's always a rough introduction, right?
I'm sure. My kids were
Back
pretty
into
tired
it.
this morning, so
Yeah.
I'm sure your students were also pretty tired.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Well, I'm going to do a quick introduction of M2N, Minority Moves Network, for anyone who might be new, and then I'm going to turn it over to you with a couple questions and just start a good discussion. So, I'm Christy Amendola, and I am the Vice President for Member Experience for M2N, Minority Moves Network. And we are a company that is committed to connecting individuals with a diverse lived experience with job opportunities. And as part of our mission, we are building an app called Empower. And that is the technology that we're using to connect our professionals with job opportunities. And part of that is to also connect them with opportunities for learning and growth and how to develop the language and the support that they need in order to feel successful, right? A lot of the way that we move in the world is about the messages that we receive. And so if the messages that we receive are positive and constructive and supportive, then the way that we're able to show up in the world will hopefully be more aligned in that way. So Janet is one of our founding voices, and she brings a different perspective to our platform than others. And I think it's really a valuable way of looking at creativity, how we use that in, I guess, what I would say non-traditional ways, right? I think so often we use the word creativity and it means art and pottery and maybe even music. But what we fail to recognize is the importance of creativity in our everyday movements and thought processes and ways that we approach the world. So I love the way that Janet integrates art and creativity in so many different aspects of her life. So Janet, if I would ask for you to just introduce yourself, tell our viewers a little bit about you, and then we'll get started.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This is so great. I really appreciate it. So, as Christy said, I'm Janet Taylor, and I'm an artist and art educator. And so, first on the artist side, I am a working artist, which means basically I am consistently creating and selling my artwork. But I have a lot of other, what do you want to say, like balls in the air, juggling around with all those different pieces of my life. So I'm an art educator, and that's a big part of what I would say is my identity, right? As well. And that's working with high school art students. I've been doing that for about 13 years. And we'll talk more about my background in a minute. But currently, I'm also working as adjunct faculty, teaching the next generation of art teachers. So that's pretty exciting. And I also work for an online university and organization that supports art teachers already teaching. So it's a graduate program, but my role in that has been in a lot of different capacities as well, like writing and creating content. But I love it because I get to support art educators across the globe, which is really, really exciting. I also do some consulting over across the United States, doing different things with different districts, specifically around like arts related needs. And then, of course, I have my art business. So those kind of things wrap together, right? So as an artist and art educator, I have my business that works on selling my artwork, but also teaching classes to people of all different ages, right? That's interesting to me, is working with kids all the way through adults, because it doesn't just end, at end of your class, I guess, right? But more importantly, I guess I would say I'm a mom of two. I have a husband, and we live in the suburbs of Chicago.
Wonderful. I love
Yeah.
that. And I do think you bring so much value because you are interacting with people from childhood all the way through adulthood and those different phases, and understanding how creativity plays a role at each phase is
Yeah.
important because, I think often we think our learning is done, our creativity is done if we're not in our art class.
Right.
But really it can extend to all parts of your life. So I think that's really fantastic.
Yeah.
Your tagline is everyone is creative.
Yes.
So tell us more, because I know that myself, I wouldn't always describe myself that way, but I'm changing my mindset because you're teaching me otherwise.
Good.
And maybe our viewers are thinking that way too. So
Yeah.
how is it that everyone is creative?
Yeah, so I mean, as an artist and an art educator, I think our biggest challenge that we hear mostly from adults, right? From parents of our students, or people see our artwork and are like, oh, wow, you're so creative. I could never do that, or I could never draw stick figures. And it's like, there's a couple pieces that we need to keep in mind when we think about creativity and maybe art making, right? And so a big piece of that, first, I guess I want to say, is that creating art is like a skill that takes time to develop. You go to classes, you learn, you practice it, you fail, and you practice some more until you create something. So it's not like we just spit out this amazing artwork, right? It's not talent. I think sometimes we think of as like a gift. All of a sudden, it's like this magical thing that comes out. And sure, like we all have gifts and talents in different capacities. And maybe, mine or another artist might be an artistic capacity. But that doesn't mean that anybody else is less creative. And so I also think that a lot of times we think of that, right? Like you said, synonymous, art and creativity. And it's like those two things are not synonymous. They work together, but they're not the same thing. And so, we go to, even in my classes, right, in my high school students at this point, they'll come into a drawing class and they'll be like, oh, I can't even draw anything. I don't know how to do that, or I'm not creative. And I think the other thing is we think of art as drawing realistically. And it's like, that's not just the only piece, right? There's so many different types of art out there. There's different ways that we express ourselves. And when you come to a drawing class, for example, you're learning skills. You're learning a skill set, techniques that you can put into your toolbox that you can later use in other capacities. And that's kind of my goal as an educator, as an artist, right? Are those two things. So when we think about creativity in a bigger picture, bigger sense, creativity is actually an innate human quality. Like, we are born with that. Other animals do not have this sense of creativity because it's kind of how our minds and souls work together. So you could think of like the earliest forms of creativity as maybe imagination. And it's kind of amazing, actually, working with student teachers. It's really fun because I'll go into all these different classrooms and see students working. And little kids, like first, second graders, you say, oh, it's a free draw time. We're going to, get a little extra time, take out a piece of paper, free draw. And those kids create like so much stuff. It's
Everything.
amazing. Yeah, they don't even need a prompt. They just are so imaginative. They just go to town. My high schoolers, for example, will be like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to draw. And so, what's really interesting about that is kind of how our systems are in play that kind of squash some of that. But I think the idea is that throughout our upbringing and societal expectations is that we move from imagination into more creative thinking. And that's the part that we need to kind of transform our brains at this point into what is creativity as an adult, right? So as adults, it's really that ability to think outside the box and to creatively problem solve, to come up with ideas, take risks. I think risk taking is a big piece of creativity, and the ability to explore and experiment, right? So these are like, again, skills that we have to practice doing, right? If we're not experimenting all the time, we're not used to doing that. we're not going to integrate that seamlessly into our daily lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that kind of takes some time. And to put it out there, right, creating is actually the highest level of thinking that could happen, right? So I don't know if you're familiar or if our people are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, but it's kind of this order of thinking of processes, right? And so to actually create something, if you have a blank canvas or, Tinker Toys even, right? So like, when we grew up, right, you had the Tinker Toys and you'd say, create something. To actually come up with something off the top of your head is very difficult. If you've never used a Tinker Toy, for example, you have to like explore it and investigate it first to understand how it works. And so when we think of creativity in that world, right, we need to have the knowledge and like this base level understanding of the content, the materials, whatever it is that we're doing, whatever in life, before we can actually do it in a new or apply it in a new and novel situation. And that's the creating part. And so that's really asking a lot of us. So when you think about it, right, just like drawing realistically takes practice, so does becoming a CEO of a company, right? Working for NASA. You didn't just like add and subtract, or you didn't just, do algebraic or calculus math equations before you could learn how to add and subtract, right? So you have to have this base knowledge before you can do anything. And creativity is the same thing. It takes practice. So are you okay if I just keep going? Because
yes.
I feel like I always have so much to
You're
say.
On a roll. You're on a roll. No, go for it.
Okay. So, when we're thinking about a lot of different ways that we're engaging in creativity in our daily practice or a daily basis, right? It's not just in making art. And so that's where kind of my tagline comes into play is that it can be about art. And art is like an entry point or a way to practice our creativity. But also, right, like you said, you could dance, you could sing, you could do all these other things, which is another art form, right? But you can also cook, right? That takes a lot of creativity. In fact, I rarely like cooking anymore because I feel like I'm accessing all these other things that I'm doing, right? And so I'm like, here's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you will like it, kind of situation in my house, right? But also, like, when you're organizing a schedule to accommodate others, if you're doing that in your daily practice in whatever field you're in, if you're at home and you're trying to manage your life with your kids, or you're trying to organize a closet, I mean, that sounds so like, I'm not good at that, right? That takes some practice, and that is actually engaging a lot of our creative thinking in order to make it happen. And so sometimes the other piece of that is we don't always feel creative, and that's okay too, right? So I look at it like creativity is like energy. It can't really be created or destroyed. It just kind of gets transferred or moved around. And so let's say, like you said, or like I was saying, if I'm organizing a closet all day long, I don't really want to make a meal, right? Or if I am coming up with a presentation deck, I'm kind of tapped out on my creativity in other ways. Or, in my case, I'm like talking to students and making decisions all day long. That's really hard to come home and then want to create something new and novel, right? And so maybe in those cases, I might be doing more practicing or utilizing the skills I already have in order to kind of get into a place where I can access creative thinking again. Does that make sense? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking a lot about myself as you're talking, and I would not have described cooking as a creative pastime, but as you're talking, I'm thinking about how much I enjoy cooking over baking. Baking to me there's a lot of rules and it feels uncomfortable. And if I mess up the rules, it's going to turn out terribly and then I'm going to be super disappointed. Whereas cooking, I enjoy because there's just so much freedom and flexibility, and you can actually make a lot of mistakes or throw in a little bit of the wrong stuff and it usually turns out fine. Or it's like my best meal. And then what my struggle with is I can't recreate it.
Yes.
Because I just sort of let myself be creative. And then I think, I don't even know what I put in that, but it turned out so lovely. But then as you were talking about like the decision making and the things that you have to do during the day, it's helping me connect sort of my own regulation. During the week, it's hard for me to come up with a good meal, and I blame it on time. But as you're talking about it, I think it might be because I'm
Tapped
tapped out
out.
of my creative juices because I mean, the work I do, I'm creating something new every day, right? Our company
Mhm.
is new, our plan is new, our strategy is new every day. So maybe I don't have any more creativity left. So I just have to go to back to, like, the basics in our house for dinner. And that's
Mhm.
probably
Mhm.
why I feel a little bit more inspired on the weekend. It's not really about time. It's about that creative energy and how much do I have available to
Right.
put towards that activity.
Right. It's
So
almost like the bucket
yeah,
filling and tipping kind of analogy too, right? Like
yeah,
I can only fit so much in my bucket until it tips and then that's it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. Thank you. You really helped me kind of understand a little bit more of my vibe during the week, and I think that's important. And you know, this is where I love the value you bring to our members, is because I think that as you start to have this introspection of yourself and maybe understanding the word creativity, the idea of creativity in larger context, you can harness that. Like, the thing we talk about with our members a lot is harnessing your superpower. Like, what is it that you bring to an organization that is really unique and really powerful to you? And as you're talking, I realize I am a really creative person. I couldn't do this role if I weren't creative, because every day I am tasked with creating something new. But had you talked to me 6 months or a year ago, I would have never described myself as creative, because I don't know how to draw a realistic picture of a bird, right?
Right.
I would have boxed that as what creativity is. And you
Right.
sort of helped me understand that differently, which I think is valuable. It's helping me identify my superpower.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly, you're taking a skill set that you have already. You've built all these tools in your toolbox, and now you get to decide how you're going to use them to, convey a message or move forward or reach a goal or whatever that is in life, right? It's the skills and everything kind of come in, and then it's what are you going to do with it? And that's the
Right.
creative thinking. That's the critical part. That's exhausting. That's what drains
Yeah.
us, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So I think this is a good time to sort of transition into, you know, talk a little bit about it, your work in the general sense, but now, like, how does that align with Empower and what we're trying to do to support our members, and how do those things connect? I mean, I think I kind of led you to that, not even on purpose. But let's explore that a little bit further.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, and I'll share this, right? When you had come to me or when we had talked about doing this, I was like, okay, look, I don't know what I have to offer, but here's what I do, and you can decide if it works for you or not. And I think that's the piece that I think through this kind of collaboration and journey, even for myself, is like, oh, right, I have all these things to offer. It's just, does what I offer align with where it needs to go? And I think,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not a business person, right? Like I haven't gone to business school, or I don't know any of that kind of piece of it. But I think there's all of these pieces that really do work together to help people find what they need to do, right? What is
Mm-hmm.
best path for them? Um, so generally speaking, I'm really interested in teaching others, kind of, as you obviously know this now, right, is to tap into our own creative practices by pushing people to be outside their comfort zones and engage in work that, is taking that practice of that creative thinking, like practicing it daily. And what does that look like? But I'm also interested in helping people identify and acknowledge where their own individual creativity exactly lies, and how to engage that in their daily life, right? And so that might be through reflection, identifying themes, etc., through art making, really, right? But then ultimately to empower others to say, hey, like you today, right? I am creative, and here's what I bring to the table, and how I can align this to benefit myself and others. And so what I love about M2N's pillars is because they really are not like standalone ideals, right? Everything really feeds into each other. So when I was thinking about this a little bit more, and as I create content for the platform, I'm always like, oh, lived experiences, like where does that really fit in? And the piece for me is really, it's about doing the work, being reflective, to consider, you know, who we are and what we've done and how those experiences actually make us valuable, right? We are valuable because we have all of this, all of these tools in our toolbox, right? Or these experiences that have impacted us in a certain way that have helped us make different decisions or can help others make better decisions. And so I used to think, wow, like I'm a master, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, right? I have like all these different things that I can do, but I'm not like an expert in this one field. And how can that actually help us? And so because of this, it's like we have so much more to share and offer than we personally even actually realize, right? It's because of the whole collective. And so I guess in my pieces of my content, I'm really interested in talking about how creativity, more now than ever right now, it's really important that we have this in our workforce and in our lives, really. And then second, my work really is focused on teaching and empowering others to find the creativity right within themselves so that they can use that. So there's not actually like steps. I can't say like, this is, you do 1, 2, and 3, and then you're more creative, right? I'm not a baker. I don't follow rules. I don't work like that. I'm more of the cook. You know, I like to like throw stuff in the saucepan and see what simmers and happens. But I like to look at different entry points to see kind of what sparks us and what interests us into aligning with our own individual goals, right? And so it's a very individual process. And so I can't say like, you know, this advice might work for you today or that advice might work for you tomorrow, but how are we going to actually do this to work together towards a common goal, right? That's the whole point is to kind of work individually first and then work collectively to figure out how we're going to bring others up, right? Because when we work together to do that, we talk about it, we share about it, then, you know, we all are doing better, right? It's not just like, it's not just like, oh, I'm really good at this. And so therefore that's it. It's like, no, I actually have something else to offer and you have something else to offer. And so when we're practicing creative thinking and creativity, we're not also then afraid to bring any and all ideas to the table. And I think that's a big piece of this, right? Is first I understand myself. Second, I'm able to kind of talk about this with my peers and work on it. But also then I'm not afraid to share and talk about these ideas, because I think that, you know, a lot of times we feel it's vulnerable, right? It's very vulnerable to say like, I've got this idea that's kind of outside the box and a little bit weird. And it's scary that people are going to be like, well, you know what, forget it, you know, or that's a dumb idea. But really when we start to create this environment at work, for example, right? If we create this environment where we value each other and our own experiences, then we're actually able to give space and weight to our ideas, even if they're failures, right? Because that's how we learn and grow. And then I would say lastly, it's kind of through that work, which is a lot, right? So these are all like the pieces that kind of fit together. It's kind of through that work, then we actually position ourselves as leaders in the field, right? To say, look, I have these great experiences. I'm going to empower others. We're going to work together as an amazing team. And now I can look and see, because I'm aware, I'm much more aware, I can look and see how everybody fits in this and what strengths that they bring. And I can look, I guess I can lead from a place of curiosity. And I think that is a really important place to be as a leader and a manager, somebody who's in charge, right? Is to be open to hearing all ideas, to be able to pick out the people who are experts in different areas and what they bring to the table.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I obviously couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, that's when it's sort of going back to you when you spoke earlier about children, right? How the children can approach, you know, free draw time just so easily and seamlessly. Children can also, they approach the world with curiosity at every moment, right? I mean, there's this little boy that lives down the street from us, and every day he walks down the street and checks out the storm drain. He's like 3 years old. It's the best time of my day to see when he comes by and sees, you know, he's going to check out the storm drain. I walk by my storm drain 100 times a day and I never peek down. My curiosity about what is down there is no longer. But if we all approach the world with such curiosity, to your point, that starts to build this layer of vulnerability and trust to explore new ideas. And that is the whole point of having a diverse and inclusive workplace, is that you've built that level of trust so that people can show their creativity to explore new ideas and new approaches to problems. And that's really how we get to the next phase. That's how we prepare a workforce for today and tomorrow, right? I mean,
Right.
the problems of tomorrow we don't even know yet.
No.
So we're all going to have to be prepared to be creative to approach them, because most of us are not going to go back to school, but we're still going to be working in 10 years, and there's going to be new problems that we have to find solutions to. And so I think that is what's really exciting about harnessing that energy of creativity in the workplace. And really starting from curiosity, just like you said.
And it's funny that you bring up about like solving new problems. You know, I always talk to my high schoolers about this too, as they're thinking about what they're going to go into, what does that look like? And me, who's like, I've changed my careers a couple times, you know, I've done all these different things, you know, and I'm like, you don't have to have it all figured out, you know, but the bigger point is, like, you go to college right now, you don't even know what's out there, because we don't know what's out there. We don't know what problems we need to find or solve. And so there will be a job for that, you know? And so if you can, you know, like you said, if you can use your creative thinking skills, that's going to last you a lifetime. It's not just a, you know, a one and done kind of situation. This is a lifelong pursuit, I guess you'd say. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, that's a lot of the fundamental piece that we talk about with M2N and with our members and with our companies is, if you want to find the right employees for your organization that are going to really benefit the purpose of the organization, you have to align with skills, right? And one of the big skills I would say would be creativity, and problem solving and good decision making, right? Those things are all connected to me. Those are fundamental skills that you want your candidates to be able to exhibit. That's a lot more, that has a higher level of correlation to their success in the workplace than where they got their 4-year degree, or even if they received a 4-year degree. And trying to sort through some of the ways we have made assumptions about somebody's fitness for the workplace, and reframing that. And I think you're identifying some of those skills that are really fundamental, that should be the first things we're looking for in our candidates, not the added bonus that we realize 6 months into the fact that they took the job of, and Janet, you know, she's pretty good at coming up with new ideas. That's what we should have talked about in the first interview call, right? Is how do you come up with a new idea? Tell me about a time when you
What's your process? What does that look like? Yeah, exactly.
And that's how you're really going to find the candidate that is going to be prepared to solve the problem that you have right now and the problem that you are going to be posed with in 3 years that you don't even know is coming yet. So a really interesting way to put it when you start to then apply it to hiring and looking at your workforce.
Yep. Gets more and more interesting, doesn't it?
See? And you just said, and when we first started talking, Janet's like, but I'm just an art educator. I said, no, I think you have a lot more to offer than that. We all have our moments of growth, right?
That's right.
We're always growing.
That's right.
So anything else, Janet, that you'd like to share with our members and viewers that you think is important along the lines of creativity and harnessing that for themselves and for those around them?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we should make sure we talk about. Yeah, I guess that kind of covers it. I mean, those are like the bigger overarching topics, right? That's the most important part, is thinking about how we're thinking creatively. What does it actually look like? And then how can we use that to our benefit, right? So I guess the other piece I guess I'll touch on briefly is, you know, in our content too, or in my particular content, one of the things that I'm interested in sharing too is how can we actually use creativity to actually regulate our bodies and prepare us for that next step. So I guess I will say, you know, as we think about art making, for example, that might be like, you know, along the same lines of creativity, that's the vehicle, right? Art making might be a vehicle, but it's how are we using our creative practices to be in touch with ourselves and be able to be our best selves and access that place of calm and regulation, so that we're actually making the best decisions, whether that's, you know, life decisions, whether that's what I'm going to make for dinner tonight, or, you know, or whether it's, you know, which project should I start working on next, you know. I think it's important that, you know, a lot of times we get out of sight of that, right? So much going on and we get bogged down. But the content that I am interested in sharing with everybody is, how are we taking all of that and how are we utilizing it to access our best selves?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just give a little teaser. There is an amazing interview in our Empower platform that will be available for our members once we go release it to the public, with you speaking with a licensed social worker, one of our mutual friends, Liz Reynolds, and really connecting those dots between how creativity and art making can be a vehicle for supporting your mental wellness, supporting your regulation. And those things I do think it's well documented about those connections. And it is a really effective way to find regulation throughout the day, because there are a lot of demands on our mental energies, and finding techniques, you know, is important. And it may be art making, it may be meditation, it may be, you know, physical walks and physical activities. But I think that the journey is practicing all of those things for yourself, and figuring out what combinations give you the best results, right? And allow you to really show up in the way that you want. We all want to come to our lives as our best selves. And sometimes it's just a journey of figuring out, what's the best scenario for me? Where does it work for me? You know, and so that conversation with you and Liz is fantastic. And I'm excited for other people to hear it, not just me.
Yeah, she's fabulous.
She is. She is. Well, Janet, I am really grateful for you. I'm grateful to have you here today. I have learned a tremendous amount from you in the short time that we've known each other. I always look forward to your content. And I hope that our viewers have thought a little bit more about the word creativity, and are starting to embrace your tagline of "Everyone is creative," because I think indeed we are. It's just a matter of identifying what that is, and maybe reframing that word.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Next, I'll just preview that we have our next live event will be on December 12th with Kaviria Leza, and hopefully everyone will join us then. Janet, thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.